All right, let's talk Superman. This is going to be a review from an angle that nobody else is going to talk about. And you might think that's a good thing. You might think that that's a horrible thing. But let's get into it. So, I was disappointed with Superman, and I'll tell you why. I think one of the core aspects of superheroes is competency. And I don't think anybody ever really talks about that, but I think it's one of the characteristics that really defines popular characters in culture. So you think about some of the most popular figures like Sherlock Holmes. People have talked about Sherlock Holmes for decades, centuries. When did Sherlock Holmes first come out? Anyway, but he is competent, right? James Bond, another iconic figure, and he's competent. One of the enjoyable things about watching a James Bond movie is watching him figure out what is going on. Unlikely competent character Jack Sparrow. I know he acts the fool and is silly, but that's the thing that makes him so compelling is that he's actually very, very competent at doing what he does. He just goes about it in a way that makes him seem like a clown. And Joker is another character in that Jack Sparrow vein. The Dark Knight, as compelling as it is due in part to the Joker's rise. And even though he says he's chaos and he doesn't have a plan, like, look at me, do I look like I have a plan? He does. He does. And we watch as he takes step by step to go from the bottom to the top. And that competency that he puts on display in that rise is one of the things that makes that character so compelling. And I would argue that that's one of the key aspects to superheroes in general that makes people so interested in them is that you have that duality of them being very human for a lot of the time, right? They're dealing with things in the regular life that they're not very good at. Bruce Wayne can't find love. Peter Parker can't balance anything in his life. Clark Kent is just this average yeehaw kind of guy that writes for a newspaper. But then they have these superpowers. And when they go into hero mode, we get to see this competency come out. And isn't that something that we all want? We all want to feel like we can change into this other outfit and be this competent person that knows exactly what to do, that has this power, and that we wield it to the best of our ability. I mean, one of the most frustrating things about the MCU, and I don't think this is just a Superman thing. I want to say this in general. I think it is a key issue with film storytelling and superheroes and the combination of the two. You see, films are structured in such a way that it's all about the build up to the catharsis and the climax, the catharsis of the climax. I'll just keep saying those two words, but everything is a build up to that, which means a lot of stories are built around the denial of something until finally that catharsis happens at the climax. So you might see somebody at their best at the very beginning of a movie, and then they're injured or compromised in some way. And a lot of the movie is them getting back to that peak performance. Or they're never at peak performance, and a lot of the movie is just them reaching that point until finally they have the breakthrough and they're the person they always thought they could be. Many stories are structured that way, and many superhero stories are structured that way, which I think ends up kind of defeating some of the purpose of superheroes. You think about Spider-Man. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Spider-Man? It's web swinging. You look at MCU Spider-Man, and he hasn't been, even though the movies have done well, not quite as popular with fans as the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and that's due in part to some of the competency issues. We don't get to see Peter Parker in the MCU be as competent at Spider-Man as we got to see Tobey Maguire. They're not getting these scenes of him swinging through the city. I mean, the Spider-Man video game, the appeal of that has always been that you get to be Spider-Man and you get to get really good at web swinging through the city and feel that competency as you're flying over buildings and flipping and hitting your next web and swinging around a corner and landing on a car and bouncing off. It's cool. It's fun. And that's something in the MCU that they've completely avoided doing, is giving us these sequences and scenes where you just get to see Spider-Man be casually competent at being Spider-Man. A lot of the time he's on his heels, barely getting to get by, and just not getting a lot of time actually as Spider-Man getting to do Spider-Man things. And in comic books, that's the main difference. In the comic book, there's issues every week or every month, and a lot of those issues are just plot of the week. And you get to see the hero be the hero throughout a lot of those issues. It's not a thing where Spider-Man goes 5 comic book issues without getting to do something cool as Spider-Man. He's a Spider-Man the majority of the time. So I think that there's this strange tension where the movies haven't quite embraced that. And it's not just superhero movies. I think it's a lot of pop culture figures or cartoon figures in general, like Transformers. That's the thing that's always kind of bothered me about the Michael Bay Transformer movies, is that so much of those movies are about the denial of the Transformers just getting to do cool Transformer stuff. And then when we finally get to see it, it's just for 30 seconds or 45 seconds at the end of it all. So Optimus Prime doesn't really have all these moments throughout of getting to be cool as Optimus Prime. There's just one moment in each movie where you're just like, hell yeah, that's Optimus Prime. That was my big issue with Superman in this movie, is that he's never Superman. He's not doing, I mean, he's Superman, but the times where he's Superman, he's almost always losing, getting the crap kicked out of him. The movie starts with him bloodied and a mess and in the snow and not able to do anything. And then he goes and does another fight and loses that fight. And then it's the big monster and he can't win that on his own. He has to rely on the Justice Group, the Justice League, to come in and help him out and actually solve the fight. And you think about the best scene in the movie, and I'm going to say best, but the one that's going to be the most memorable, I think, is Mr. Terrific on the beach when he takes out all the guards and we see his competency with his orbs. It's cool, it's awesome, and it's something we never see Superman do in this entire movie. The one time we see him actually be good as Superman, fighting and being Superman, is when at the very end there's the slew of just random enemies with jetpacks that come and try to attack him, and he decimates them. There's the one other time when he's fighting his clone, and it's when the clone finally loses contact, and we're told by Luthor that the clone's dumber than Superman. So it's this clone that isn't very capable on its own in general, and that's the first time in the entire movie that we see Superman really be Superman and super and strong and feel powerful. Otherwise, all the things that he's doing that really show competency are just grabbing people when debris is going to hit them or stopping something from landing on somebody. We have multiple shots where it's like, oh my goodness, Superman caught the building, or Superman stopped a foot from crunching something. But that, I don't think in and of itself is interesting enough. And I think that's my major issue. Go back to a couple other characters just to show the competency thing. Lord of the Rings, and the structure of Lord of the Rings is that you have these hobbits who aren't heroes in any way, shape, or form, who have this tremendous responsibility. And then they meet Strider. And how much cooler is Strider than the hobbits? And that's why Aragorn, so many people's favorite character, because they've been following these other characters who aren't very competent, who are scared and fearful, which makes them endearing in a lot of ways because people can relate to them. But Aragorn is the one where people are just like, oh my goodness, what a cool character. And in the movies, I've never read the book, but at least in the movies, Legolas is also a beloved character because he's so cool in combat. He doesn't get a lot of plot time, like character development in the middle of the film, but every time there's a battle sequence, he's the one doing the coolest stuff, and it's fun to watch him, and it makes him iconic in a way, and endearing in a way, and interesting in a way. I think if you go through a lot of your favorite TV shows, movies, novels, what have you, the characters that stand out the most to you and maybe are the ones that you find yourself thinking about the most are the ones that show competency. And that's why there's a whole thing at this point talking about competency porn. On TikTok, you see a lot of people that are just good at what they do, whether it's mowing yards or detailing a car or painting a house or a room or cleaning a house, just doing the thing that they're good at and being competent at that thing. And they don't have to be groundbreaking, right? They're not building a science experiment that's never been made before, or doing something crazy. It's just mowing a yard in a way that was really, the yard was really messy and they're cleaning it up, or they're power washing something that was really messy, and you get to see that thing go from unfinished to finish. That's really compelling to a lot of people for some reason. I mean, I get it too. It happens to me, but that was one of the things. Oh, my screen light went out. That was one of the things that made Iron Man such a great movie and Tony Stark such an immediately iconic character, was that you put Tony Stark in a situation, MCU Tony Stark in a situation, and he has an idea about what to do. You give him a box of scraps in a cave, and he's going to build a suit that gets him out of the cave. It's not that Tony is incapable and doubting himself in that first movie and doesn't know what to do. It's that he's figuring it out along the way, and we get to be with him on that ride as he conquers hurdle after hurdle. And that's why the second and third movies suck. I'll say it. Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 suck. I know people really like Iron Man 3. I don't, but that's one of the reasons is that Tony's compromised the entire time in both 2 and 3, where he's doubting himself or he doesn't have his suit. And it's less interesting because you're not seeing Tony at his best. The Ironheart show that just happened, so much of that show is Riri not being able to figure out herself and like waiting and delaying for her to finally like hit her stride. And that's what I was talking about earlier about the structure of so many shows and movies at this point is denial and waiting for that idea of when the character can finally be at their best. And I meant to say this earlier and not 10 minutes in, but part of Clark's story in this, or the main thrust of Clark's story in Superman, is that he's human, right? He says to Luthor, that's my greatest power. I'm human. I care. I mess up. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. So he gets beaten up a lot in this movie and loses his temper all the time and doesn't solve situations in the best way. Like almost every situation he's in, he needs somebody else to solve it. It's just not him on his own being capable of getting something done. He needs Crypto. Was it Crypto actually? I don't know if they ever call the dog anything, but he needs Superdog to come in and help him, or he needs Terrific, or he needs Lois Lane, or he needs Green Lantern, somebody else to come in and do something before he's able to do something. Even the fights he wins, it's almost passively. He flies up towards the sun and just plummets down to earth. And that's his passive way of winning one fight. Or he has his shoulder, he's in that shoulder arm lock with his clone and just rolls. And it's a bus that comes through and knocks that guy out. He's not actually doing much. And I think that's humanizing him in a way, but it's also making him feel less competent. And I think that's my main issue with this movie, and my main issue with a lot of MCU movies at this point is that they don't embrace the characters actually being good at what they do and being like great and interesting and dynamic people. They embrace them as being more flawed and figuring it out, but we never get to see them with it figured out, which I think is some of the problem at this point. It's like people complain a lot about origin stories, and I don't want to see another origin story. I don't want to see another character having like doubts about whether or not they're good enough to do this thing or how they should be doing it. Just like find an interesting take. That was the thing that made the Batman so compelling. It's another movie where I know a lot of people are like, it's too slow. Robert Pattinson, which if you're doubting Robert Pattinson at this point, that's a whole other issue. But that movie, he's pretty capable throughout. Like he's just on an investigation and it's taking him a little bit to put the pieces together, but it's competence. We're seeing the detective Batman do the things that he needs to do to solve the riddle of the Riddler and really arrive at the place that he needs to be at the right time. And that competency is one of the reasons that makes that movie so compelling. And it's the same thing with Batman Begins. You look at Batman Begins and that version of Bruce Wayne is a lot more capable than what we see in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. And it's one of the reasons I personally find The Dark Knight Rises pretty annoying, is that Batman once again is in this position of being flawed, not like figuring, like knowing how to be Batman anymore and having to figure it out along the way until finally he's Batman again. And look, he does cool things. The Batman, just let the Batman be the Batman. It felt a lot more like a comic book in that way, rather than the standard movie that has the character embrace himself or themselves at the climactic moment. But up until then, it's this like back and forth thing. So I get that they're trying to make Clark seem human and really make him endearing in that way, but I also think it's a flaw to never, as Superman, have him be good at anything. He's never just the best. And they tell us at the beginning of the movie that he's the most powerful metahuman and like the peak metahuman, and we never see that. I mean, even the main problem that he solves doesn't need him. Like, he's not the one that stops the riff. And the fact that, like, he's trying to stop an intergalactic riff, fighting's not going to do that. It's not him fighting that actually wins that over. One other thing that I want to point out that's just a little bit of the audience manipulation that's going on. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Every movie's manipulating its audience. But I thought it was a really fascinating thing because James Gunn had the problem of having to deal with all this expectation of his version of Superman, and will people embrace the character or not embrace the character, and how he kind of got around that and tricks the audience a little bit. And again, I'm not saying that in a negative way, part of telling a story is tricking the audience into believing what you want them to believe and taking them on that journey. But part of the way he does that is to have Lois Lane not be entirely bought in on Clark. So she was going to break up with him, right? She's not like, she doesn't quite love him yet. He's more into her than she is into him. So over the course of the movie, as we see her fall in love with Clark a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until she finally truly loves him, she's the audience surrogate at that point. Her skepticism is our skepticism. And as she's won over, we're won over. And then by the time they're kissing at the end and she's saying, I love you, there's supposed to be this audience surrogacy that's going on where we feel more attached and like happy for Clark and accepting of him and accepting of this couple. It's really well done. I think it's the best thing that the movie does, is have that. And it's a really like higher level piece of writing that I don't think a lot of people are often aware of how to wield that and what to do with it, especially when the problem is this big of how do you get a new version of this hero accepted by people when there's such a rabid fan base that's ready to deny it and reject it. So that was really well done. I give it a lot of credit there. But the core thing is that I want to see Superman do cool Superman stuff, and this movie constantly does not allow that to happen. So just the foundational premise of the direction that James Gunn took this, I disagree with, which makes it a less than stellar experience for me. Like I wouldn't rate it very highly. I'm not going to be looking forward to watching it again. I'm much more looking forward to watching the other versions of Superman over this. That's not to say that this is poorly made at all. It's just I disagree with the core choice. And I know there's a lot of people that won't care. But I think that it's going to be something, the more people think about it and the more that they see Superman not get to be Superman, they may land a little bit more closer to where I am with it. So unfortunately, not one of my favorites of 2025, but that's it for now. Sorry this was so long, but maybe the next ones will be shorter. Cheers.